I just got back taking the new animals to the vet. I went ahead and gave them all their first rounds of BRD vaccinations. I gave them that nasal gen PMH. I got them a shot of Covaxin. I got them all dewormed, and then I got them all steered, and so we're all good to go on that end. I only had one calf that was really bawling, but luckily that one calf that was bawling was the one animal that had been steered. And so that one animal had already been steered. So out of the 6 animals, one of the animals had already been steered, and the animal that was already steered was the bawling calf. And so I got very fortunate on that, because when a calf is bawling, I don't steer a bawling calf. You know, I don't want to add more stress onto that animal. And so the one animal that had already been steered was the bawling calf. And so I got very fortunate about that. And you know, 3 of the animals still weigh 275 pounds, so I went ahead and just gave them the nasal gen. And here in a couple of weeks, I will give them a booster shot of an injectable BRD vaccination. Also, that has you know, what is it, a BVD vaccination. You know, I'll give them a BRD BVD vaccination. And so the whole big idea is that, you know, okay, as of right now, I would be willing to bet. All right, I would legitimately bet. All right, I'm just telling you, it is what it is. You know, the whole thing about this is that I'm not being arrogant about it. All right, at the end of the day, I worked for it. It's, you know, it's whatever. All right, you want to be a bum, you can be a bum by yourself. Die poor alone. Don't take anybody else down with you. The whole thing about this is that, you know, I don't feel malicious. I'm not a malicious person when I say these things. It just is what it is. I worked for it. All right, you know, it is what it is. Okay, and here's the thing. When I take a look at it for what it is, I would say that over the next 2.5 months, I will make about $100,000. I might make a little bit more. All right, I might legitimately make a little bit more than 100 grand over the next 2.5 months. All right, you know, it is what it is. I've taken a look at it. I understand what's happening, and the whole thing about me making money is that, you know, and you should already understand this by now, but me, when I make money, and I was even talking about this yesterday, but when it comes to money, you know, I don't spend a lot of time every day thinking about money. Maybe I spend about 45 minutes a day thinking about money. The rest of the day, I'm thinking about, you know, what do I need to do for my animals? You know, how's my balance sheet looking? What am I looking to accomplish over the next few months? What am I looking to accomplish over the next year? You know, that's the kind of stuff that I think about. I'm legitimately in a situation where I don't have to worry about money anymore. And I talk about this in terms of a realistic sense. I legitimately do not worry about money at all. At all, legitimately. I don't worry about money at all. And I spoke, and I was kind of giving, you know, a little bit more of a perspective on this from yesterday. And just to put things in perspective, for me to pay all of my bills, legitimately, okay, and you know, in terms of money, in a realistic sense, the majority of my money goes into growing my business. Legitimately, that's where a majority of my money goes. Almost all of my money legitimately goes into just growing my business. In terms of me paying my bills, like me paying for my house, me paying for my truck, me paying for my bills, me paying for my insurance, me paying for my food, all of that stuff, it costs me maybe about 5% of what I make, maybe 10%. All right, when I think about paying for my house, when I think about paying for my truck, when I think about paying for my electricity bill, when I think about paying for the things that I need to just live my life, it costs about 5 to 10% of the money that I make. All right, you know, I don't, you know, effectively, and I've been talking about this for a long time, and I even show you how I do it, and I show you exactly how I do it and how I conceptualize this idea. I actually end up investing more than 100% of my money every year. I invest more than 100%. All right, and in terms of a realistic sense, you know, I spoke about this, you know, and my income has been going up drastically, very quickly. I'm actually already in a situation, like even right now, you know, just from the money that I made last week, I still have like $7,800 left over. I legitimately have this money and I cannot put it back into my business. You know, I'm having a very difficult time putting it back into my business. All right, and I'm already in a situation where I have a large amount of positive equity, and I even grew my balance sheet. All right, if I took that $7,800, and I was even talking about this yesterday, but I already have enough positive equity to deleverage myself completely today, and I will still have tens of thousands of dollars left over. All right, I could legitimately deleverage myself already, completely. All right, I have enough positive equity to deleverage my entire balance sheet already, and I wasn't even planning to deleverage, and I've been planning to deleverage my balance sheet in 2 months, right? And even today, I'm already in a situation where I cannot reinvest all of the money that I make. I'm having a difficult time doing that. All right, and so how am I going to overcome this problem? I'm going to buy myself more land, right? I'm looking to buy myself more land. But here's a realistic way to look at this. Because let's say that my goal was to spend money, right? Let's say that my goal was to spend money, and I said I wanted to just maximize the amount of money that I can spend without really putting myself into any kind of financial hot water. How would I do that? Well, the $7,800 that I have in my bank account right now, I would go and I would buy 8 more animals. And then I would take my 8 biggest animals and I would liquidate them. I would keep my business running sideways, and then I would scrape the money off the top. All right, so realistically, if I went and I spent $15,000 today, all right, it wouldn't even matter. If I legitimately spent like $7, $8, $9, $10,000 a week, it would not matter. My business would run sideways. But this is a very realistic way of looking at it. Like right now, I have about 8 grand, right? I have about 7,800 bucks, right? I still have that money left over, even after I grew my business by about 8%. I bought myself a load of grain. I grew my business by 8%. I still have about $8,000 left over. If I was legitimately looking to spend money, and I've already said I already have a credit card, but let's say that for whatever reason I've decided that I wanted to spend cash. And at the end of the day, I would just use my credit card, and I'm already looking into liquidating my animals in a month or two, right? And I've actually taken a look at my animals, and the bigger animals that I brought in yesterday, the bigger 3, so I brought in 3 animals that weighed between 270 and 290, and then I brought in 3 animals that weighed between 415 and 450. And the 3 animals that weigh 415 to 450 are actually smaller than the animals that I have here. So the average weight of the animals that I have here are probably close to about 500 already. I'm already looking to plan, and I was talking about this yesterday, as the number of animals that I have increased, the frequency of payments that I pay myself will increase, but the amount of money will stay the same. So effectively, a realistic way to look at this, about 3 months ago, I started off with about 37 animals, right? I had about 35, 37 animals, but now I have 50, and I still have enough money to buy 8 more. All right, and that's just me reinvesting my earnings. I'm not using any debt at all. Legitimately 0 leverage. I'm not using any leverage, okay? I'm not using any leverage. I effectively have enough money to buy 8 more animals, but I'm having a difficult time reinvesting all of this money because, I'm looking to buy more land, okay? And so the whole situation with this is that if I was legitimately, okay, think about it like this. So I have determined that 50 animals is my maximum capacity, right? I have determined that 50 animals are my maximum capacity. I have money sitting in the bank, and I have an excessive amount of positive equity, right? I have a very large amount of positive equity in my investment. So in this scenario, when you include everything for what it is, I would actually take the $8,000 that I have left over from selling my cattle last month, and I would buy 8 more animals, and then I would sell 8 of my biggest animals. That's how I would do it, right? I have a massive excess of positive equity, right? I have a large excess of positive equity. I still have money left over, right? And and in this situation, I would actually take the money that I have in my bank account, and I would buy more animals, and then I would take the bigger animals to the sale barn, which would keep my business running sideways, and that would open up the maximum amount of cash for me to utilize. All right, that's how I would do it. And so, and which I'm not going to do because I've already spoken about this. I have a credit card. If I legitimately need to spend money, or if I legitimately feel like spending money, I will just use the credit card. And then when granted that I don't spend some excessive amount of money, like $40,000 a month or something, which I'm not going to do. I have not done that ever in my entire life, other than buying cattle. The whole thing, about that, and and I, whatever, right? And the whole thing about this is that, because I'm already planning to liquidate animals every 2 months, right? And realistically, when I take the money that I make, and let's just say that I do what I say I'm going to do, right? Let's just, I've said, let's use our imagination. All right, let's just use our imagination. I've clearly indicated exactly what direction I will go. I have clearly indicated exactly what I will do. Right, I've already said this is exactly where the direction that I'm going, and this is exactly what I'm going to do, right? Let's just use our imagination, and let's say that I do what I say I'm going to do, right? By the end of the year, I will have ran almost 400 cattle by myself. I'm already on about 100. I'm already at 90. I'm only farming 50 acres. I only have 15 animals on my lease property, and I've already ran 90 animals for the year. Already ran 90. I still have enough money to buy 5 to 10 more. All right, it's only been 5.5 months, and I'm borderline already at 100 animals, and I am not using any leverage right now. I'm legitimately using zero leverage. If I were to leverage myself in this situation, I spoke about this yesterday, I have a large amount of positive equity. I still have money in the bank. Right, I have 50 animals total, and out of those 50 animals, let's just say 25 of them are stabilized. If I have 25 stabilized animals, they have already gone up in value. During the time period that it took me to stabilize the animals, they have gone up in value, and I anticipate that they will continue to go up in value over the next 2 or 3 months. Right, that increase in value is the unrealized gain. So in the situation that I am in right now, for me to run my business effectively, what I call optimally, right? I'm not going to put myself in some massive, financial, I'm not going to leverage myself to the eyeballs, but I would be willing to utilize leverage in the right situation, but I need more land. In this situation that I'm in, my investment has accrued a large amount of positive equity. I am very far in the net positive, right? I have made a massive sum of money. All right, in this situation, I would be willing to leverage against the number of animals that I have in my stabilized herd. I would be willing to do it. Am I going to do that right now? No, I'm not. Why? Because if I did that, I would legitimately have to go and buy 35 animals today. And that wouldn't even keep that wouldn't even take my balance sheet negative. All right, and I'm not lying to you. I'm legitimately telling you the truth. And I am telling you exactly what I am looking at. All right, I have a balance sheet. This balance sheet has assets on it. Effectively, but in terms of the assets that I'm talking about cattle, right? I'm not talking about land. I'm not talking about my business. I'm just talking about cattle. I have these cattle, right? I bought these animals, and the whole thing about me is that, I buy these animals at appraisal values, right? I buy animals at appraisal values, et cetera, right? I buy the animals at appraisal value. And when I buy my animals, I buy them according to the commodity markets and et cetera, et cetera. So I have, and I go and I buy the animals by myself, right? I legitimately go and buy my animals by myself. And so the whole thing about this is that, I pay appraisal value for the animals, right? That's the big idea. I pay appraisal value for the animals. And when I pay appraisal value for the animals, if I legitimately want my money back, I can just liquidate the animal, right? That's the whole idea. I am not spending any money. I am trading the money for something that is equally as valuable as the money, with the intentions of growing the money and getting myself a tax benefit. Right, that's the whole big idea. So I'm in a situation right now where I have animals on my balance sheet. I've stabilized these animals, and in that time period that I was stabilizing these animals, I have substantially raised the value of the animal. And in this situation, and I also have, money left over in the bank, a pretty substantial amount. And I also have a credit card, right? If I legitimately want to buy anything, I can just put it on my credit card. Granted that I'm not going to go and spend some excessive amount of money, which I don't do. That's one of the things about me. I legitimately, I don't spend hardly anything. All right. In terms of a realistic sense, I actually invest over 100% of my income every year. In terms of the amount of money that I spend, in terms of relation to the amount of money that I make, maybe I spend 10%. Maybe. I legitimately invest 90% of my money. And then I take a loan for 60% more, 70% more. All right, I'm telling you the truth. I am telling you this is exactly how I do it. I legitimately invest 90% of my money, maybe even 95%. And in reality, I actually invest more than that because I utilize debt. And when I utilize debt, I leverage against my balance sheet. And when I leverage against my balance sheet, I never take my balance sheet negative. If I need to pay back all my loans, I can pay back my loans whenever I need to. If the bank calls me tomorrow and says, hey, you need to pay your loans back, I will just say, here's the money, leave me alone. If you ever give me this call again, I'm never doing business with your bank again. All right, legitimately, that's how I run my balance sheet. And I've spoken about this in terms of money. The whole thing about money is that, if it comes down to it, if I legitimately think that I'm doing business with an idiot, I will take my money and I will walk. Because the thing about me is that, and I know that this, and I'm okay, when I talk about these things, I'm not looking to be an arrogant prick about it. I'm not looking to be a doofus about it. I'm just telling you it is what it is. This is how I see it. At the end of the day, I'm the one who knows how to make the money. All right, I could legitimately have nothing right now, and with $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years, no problem. It wouldn't even be difficult. I could do it. All right, when it comes to making money, I make more money than anybody on the entire planet, just about. Short of people like Warren Buffett. Legitimately, I make drastically more money than anybody on the entire planet. If I only had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 within 2 years, no problem. And I've spoken about this in terms of other perspectives. Like when it comes to farming, I may legitimately be one of the best farmers, if not the best farmer on the entire planet. All right, I legitimately made more money than anybody in the entire U.S. economy running commercial cattle on a 10.5 acre field. Just about, drastically more money. And just another way to look at this is that I would be willing to bet right now that over the next 2.5 months, my cattle business will make just over $100,000. Legitimately, my cattle business over the next 2.5 months will make over $100,000, just about. What will I do with the money? Deleverage myself and buy myself a new piece of land. Buy myself more cattle. Then I'll figure it out. Am I going to go on a mystical, magical journey? No, I'm not. Oh my God, now is my chance to live my dream. I don't ever think about stuff like that. In terms of a realistic sense, when it comes to money, I don't spend a lot of time every day thinking about money. Maybe I spend 45 minutes a day thinking about money. And out of those 45 minutes, maybe it's 44 minutes that I think about, in terms of, and maybe I spend 44 minutes and 30 seconds thinking about investments. That's legitimate. That's the only thing that I think about when it comes to money, just about. About 99.999% of the time is where should I invest my money? I don't think about paying my bills. I don't think about going on a magical journey. I don't think about, living my dream, nothing. Legitimately, the only thing I think about is where should I invest my money? That's it. And the whole idea of, and I was talking about this yesterday, but the big idea of investing is that when you invest your money, the whole reason you invest your money is to get a positive return, okay? And I was talking about this yesterday, and I've spoken about this multiple times, and I'm not encouraging anybody to go and put your money in an investment that makes you 1% a year. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying in a theoretical sense, if you put your money into something that produces even a 1% yield, if it legitimately produces you 1%, you theoretically, if you hold on to that investment forever, and that, granted that it's a decent investment like the S&P 500, I always use the S&P 500 as an example because there is a 1.26% dividend yield on it, and it is a very stable asset. You're effectively buying a small piece of the 500 biggest companies in America, and America is effectively the greatest economy on the planet by a long shot. If you legitimately find some obscure bond or you find some obscure stock in some foreign country that you legitimately believe can make you a larger positive return than some American company, then go and put your money in that company. But, you know, in terms of a realistic sense, something like the S&P 500 is something that everybody can understand. And let's say that you have the S&P 500. And I was talking about this, and I talk about this all the time, but in terms of a realistic sense, the amount of money that you actually need in the world to have a decent life, to legitimately live your life and not worry about money, is a finite amount of money. If you become an idiot, you can legitimately lose as much money. The sky's the limit. There is no light at the end of the tunnel if you're an idiot. I talk about this, right? You're effectively going to go on a negative death loop spiral forever, and then you'll just die poor. All right, you know, but, you know, the whole thing is that the amount of money that you actually need, this is from what I have seen, the amount of money that you actually need to effectively buy anything on the entire planet and not worry about money is very finite. Once you start making a certain amount of money, it's effectively unlimited money. All right, and when you invest a portion of your money and you make a positive return on that portion of your money, you know, granted that you buy a decent asset and it is producing, you know, something like the S&P 500, even if it is only giving you a 1% return every year, if you put enough money into that asset, you will reach that finite amount of money that you need to effectively just live without worrying about money. And that amount of money, from what I have seen, is you have to start bringing home about $15,000 a month. And the whole thing about this, and, you know, and I talk about it from my perspective, but me, I legitimately do not worry about money at all. All right, if I legitimately had nothing, I could just redo it all. And I talk about farming, right? The thing about farming is that, you know, your opinions are not going to do it. You know, I talk about farming all the time. You know, the whole thing about farming is that, number one, your opinions aren't going to do anything. If you can farm, you can farm, and if you can't, then you can't. That's how it legitimately turns out. And, you know, and I've said this in terms of a realistic sense. You know, a very realistic way to look at this is, imagine getting put on a field with me. If you were put on a field with me and they said, you know, whoever can actually farm makes the money. Whoever actually does the work gets the money. Guess what? I will probably make all of the money. Disproportionately more money than everybody. And I've always talked about, you know, the fundamental idea of sharing the pie evenly is communist. You cannot share the pie evenly. That's not possible. Why? Because at the end of the day, the average person is not a saint. People steal, people lie, people cheat, people scheme, people do all sorts of moronic things. You cannot share the pie evenly. All right, at the end of the day, what's actually more important is that you actually learn how to do the work. You have to actually go out and do it. And I talked about this multiple times. The whole idea is that success is a one-man journey. Nobody is going to go and be successful for you. And, you know, in terms of the amount of money that I make, just thinking about that. All right, if it was relatively easy, more people would be doing it. If it was even remotely easy, more people would be doing it. You know, I will legitimately make probably just over $100,000 in the next 2.5 months. Farming cattle in my backyard. All right, you know, if it was even remotely close to being easy, other people would do it. And at the end of the day, the whole thing about farming is that the barrier of entry to farming is the skill set. You actually have to learn how to farm. Learning how to farm is going to take a long time, and it is very difficult. You know, the sheer level of effort that you need to, farming is not easy. And I don't know how else to put this. You know, go and figure it out for yourself. I legitimately don't know anybody even doing 10%. And, you know, and that's the thing about money is, you know, and I talk about this all the time, you know, even if I had nothing, I could just make myself, you know, practically as much money as I ever need by just farming. It doesn't matter to me, all right? And I've spoken about this, but, you know, like if you, you know, and I'm not a malicious person, you know, and I know that this, you know, I know that sometimes that this stuff sounds kind of, you know, whatever, right? You know, it sounds kind of, you know, whatever, but understand that I'm not malicious, all right? I'm not a malicious person. I legitimately had to work my entire life just about to make it. You know, I didn't get paid until my 12th year. And as of today, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you know, I make a massive amount of money and, you know, it just is what it is. All right. I've made my peace with God about it. I understand what's happening. You know, and if I could legitimately save people by giving them money, I would legitimately give away every dollar that I ever make. You can't save people with money. All right, and actually, in terms of doing something like this, and I think that this is important. If you actually go out and do something that is extremely difficult, like let's say that you've actually come to the conclusion that you want to learn to farm like this. You actually want to be a farmer like this, and then you're actually willing to do the work, right? Like you might legitimately have to work every single day for the next 15 years of your life. Like you have come to that conclusion, and you're getting started, right? And you're learning how to do the basic stuff, and you're building a strong fundamental basis. And I've already said that, don't get discouraged, because if you look for the finish line, you'll never make it. And in reality, what you should look for is the 10% mark. If you can get to the 10% mark, you can actually practice for free. Understand that. And once you start practicing for free, you don't have to worry about the money anymore, and then you will start to develop the wealth mindset as well. You will understand, oh, all of the money that I'm putting into this thing is actually coming back to me, and I'm actually making a positive return, a small bit of a positive return, right? And then you won't have to worry about the money, right? And as of today, I don't worry about the money at all. Okay, why would I worry about the money? Farming does not cost me anything. It makes me a massive amount of money. Farming, I legitimately make more money farming cattle in my backyard than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything. By a lot, too. It's not even close. I will probably make just over $100,000 in the next 2.5 months. All right, and if it was even relatively close to being easy, people would already be doing it. And I put a lot of emphasis on this idea. Like, if you're legitimately looking for the finish line, you're never going to make it, okay? You should focus yourself on getting to the 10% mark. And when you get to the 10% mark, you will find that everything that you do it pays for itself. When you, the $500 a year that, the $1,000 a year that you need to grow your grass, you can make that money back. All right, you might even make a positive return on your $1,000. All right, and then you can start developing that what I call the wealth mindset, right? What I refer to as the wealth mindset. The whole idea of money, and this is one of the big ideas of the wealth mindset, is that, you should not be looking to, in terms of my reality, 99.99999% of the time that I'm even thinking about money, which I don't really think about money a lot, is spent thinking about investments. All right, this is very important, making a positive return with the money. That's how I spend my time thinking about money. A majority of it. The bills that I have to pay are a fraction of the money that I make. In terms of how much money do I use to legitimately live my life and not be worried about anything. Like, I have plenty of food, I have plenty of water, I have a roof over my head, I have a nice truck. I'm not worried about my bills. All right, legitimately, I just pay for everything. It's a fraction of the money that I make, maybe about 5 or 10%. About 90 to 95% of my money gets invested. And when it comes to an investment, what I'm looking for is a very large equitable asset that produces a positive return. And I've talked, in terms of my reality, and I'm not saying that you should become a cattleman to make money. Most people cannot make money in the cattle business practically under any circumstance. I'm not lying to you about this. Most people cannot make money as a farmer. Almost, farming is not one of those things where it's like, if you do whatever, then you get a comfy desk job, and then you can get your you can get your salary, and then farming is legitimately like, if you suck, you're gonna make nothing. You'll actually lose everything. All right, it's not like getting a college degree. It's legitimately, you can either do it or you can't. And if you can't, you will legitimately be a bum for the rest of your life. That's what happens in farming. You're legitimately not gonna make anything. It's not like some salary job where it's like, if you just get the degree and then, and then whatever, right? And it's, and you get to be in a nice little room and it's not like that. It's legitimately like you are out working all the time. You are working with like giant animals, right? If you don't know how to plant the grass, if you don't know how to plant a crop, if you don't know how to grow a crop, then you're boned, right? You'll have to run the business by yourself. You'll have to run a business. You'll have to run cattle. You'll have to grow grass. And if you can't do it, you're not going to end up in some, decent salary position. All right, it's not going to be like, if because it's imagine that you show up at a company and it's like you have to be the CEO of the company or you're not going to make it. That's effectively what farming is, because you're effectively the CEO of your farm. You'll have to grow your own grass. You'll have to run your own cattle. You're effectively your own chief everything officer. You'll have to run your own business. And if your farm doesn't make it, guess what? You will probably go into crippling debt for the rest of your life. Legitimately, it's not like you get some, it's not like you end up with some salary. But that's a very realistic way to look at it. There is very little opportunity for like a salary job in farming. You're probably not going to make a salary job as a farmer. You could probably, you would be more better, you would be better off, you would be more, realistically better off in terms of a percentage of getting a salary job, doing something like being an animal nutritionist. All right, there are very small opportunities, probably even no opportunities for a salary job in farming. Legitimately zero, none. All right, there are zero opportunities to get a salary job as a farmer. You either make it or you don't. And most people don't make it. And but that's a very realistic way of looking at what I'm talking about. Because, like if you work at a company, there are many places in that company where you can get a salary job, right? But if you're whatever, right? But, like if you're looking to get into like working with cattle, or, if you just want to do one thing, you want to specialize in one thing, then you're more likely to get a salary job than by becoming a farmer. If you legitimately become a farmer, you will have to grow your own crop, you will have to raise your own cattle, and you will have to run your own business. And if you don't do it, you'll effectively just get wrecked. You'll lose all your money. You'll barely make enough to get by. You might as well just have gotten that salary job. Legitimately, you will probably make more money with less time spent working a salary job than starting your own farm. Starting your own farm is gonna, I'm telling you, it's not easy. If it was easy, more people would be doing it. I legitimately don't know anybody even doing 10%. But I'm not lying about it. That there are practically zero salary positions as a farmer. You're not, chances are you're not going to go and work on a farm and become a salary person. Granted that, like if you're like some animal specialist, right, then, like if you're like some animal nutritionist specialist, or if you're, something like that, then sure, then you have more of an opportunity to, to get a salary job. But you're not going to get a salary job as a farmer. Either you make it or you don't. That's what's going to happen. Either you make it or you don't. Nobody's going to save you. Nobody cares about your journey. Nobody cares about whatever either you do the work or you don't. Nobody cares about your opinion. And I am legitimately showing, and I'm just going to be completely honest about it, because it is what it is. I don't feel bad about saying it. At the end of the day, I'm the one who earned it. I actually made it. It's whatever. I will make just over $100,000 in the next 2.5 months. Legitimately, I will. All right, and that's that, and it is what it is. All right, and the amount of money that I am making is actually going up very quickly. All right, but that's a more realistic sense. Because it's like if you're legitimately in a situation where you want to become a farmer, it's going to take a long time, okay? But that's one of the hardest things about it, is that, if you want to learn to become a farmer, you effectively have to teach yourself how to do it, because there are legitimately zero opportunities in the career unless you learn how to do everything. You legitimately have zero opportunities. But if you like legitimately go and you become like an animal specialist, or you become like a soil scientist, then, maybe you can work for one of these giant farming corporations. But, there are effectively zero opportunities for you want to start a farm by yourself unless you legitimately learn how to do everything. Like if you are in a situation like me, where you are going to start your own farm and you legitimately start farms by yourself, you will effectively have to learn how to do everything on your own. And if you do not do that, guess what? You have no opportunity. You will legitimately just lose everything. You might as well just have gotten a job. Legitimately, you might as well just have gotten yourself a salary job doing something else. Because number one, you'll spend less money, or you'll spend less time on it, significantly less time. I legitimately work 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes even more. All right, you will spend less time on it, and you will probably even make more money. That's how it turns out. When you want to become a farmer, it's not like you get to go and just go down the street and get a job. It's not like you get to go into town and get a job. It's like you are legitimately on your own by yourself, and if you make it, you make it, and if you don't, you don't. You will have to learn how to do everything. Nobody's going to save you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your opinion. You will legitimately have to learn how to do everything. And if you can't, then guess what? You don't make it. That's how it turns out. Me, when I go and I start a farm, I do everything by myself, just about. All right, legitimately. I grow my own grass. I run my own cattle. I run my own business. I find my own real estate. I manage my own finances, everything. All right, it's not like you're going to walk into some desk job and get yourself a salary. All right, and that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.